after Mashiach comes, we're all going to have das. After Mashiach comes, everyone's going to have das. Now, it does say in Psukim that after Mashiach comes, Yidna Pasha are going to be Nevi'im. Now, being a Navi means going back to how it was by Matan Torah. And if you experience God intimately, I would assume you have a considerable amount of das in your relationship with Hashem. But I tried to explain how the world doesn't have to change that much for the world to change enormously. If you see the Eibishter, if the Eibishter allows us to see His hand in our life, all of a sudden we have das. It's not such an impossible thing to fathom. There's case histories, there's examples for it, which I talked about a little bit yesterday. So I want to begin on page Chav Dalet, which is the last page of this Maimed, 6 lines in, and it's mamish the middle of a sentence. That's where I'm starting. U'ba'oifen dekamayim layom mechasim. It's in a way that waters covers the sea. Translates the Rebbe, Shaha'oyer v'hagilu, the kind of light and the kind of revelation, or the kind of das, which is going to be after Mashiach comes, what's called the 7th millennia. Yiyeh bekulam b'shav, all Jews are going to experience equally. Okay, so I guess, just to make a clarification, okay? It's important to appreciate that there's 2 separate things. One is Mashiach, and the other is Elam Haba. After Mashiach comes, and we're expecting him every minute, life is going to continue pretty much as it is now. After Mashiach comes, life is going to continue pretty much as it is now. There'll be changes. There'll be good changes. But it's not like after Mashiach comes, there's no life. People are born, people are die, people grow up, people get married. People work, people learn, people daven, people are involved in holiness. So the improvements of after Mashiach is improvements on the life we know. Olam Haba is a completely different world. When the Rebbe says that the 7th millennia every Jew is going to have das, that's not necessarily Mashiach, because Mashiach has to happen in the 6th millennia. The 7th millennia is Shabbos. That's called Olam Haba. That's called reward. And in that world, all Yidden are going to have das. And now he adds another thing: we're all going to have equal das. In other words, after there's going to be a time when knowing God is going to be as simple as knowing the person sitting next to you. The Eibush is going to be very, very real. Something very real. And he uses the expression "kamayim l'yom achas," as water covers the sea. What is the metaphor of water covering the sea? This is a pasuk in Yeshaya, which is quoted at the end of Rambam. Kamayim l'yom achas, as water covers the sea. What is the mashal of water covering the sea? What is the metaphor of water covering the sea? The mashal of water covering the sea is that you don't see the fish; you just see the water. So the segue to today's class about fish inside Balachayim is entirely apropos. Okay, I'll give you the philosophy of it. According to Torah, land animals, which means mammals, most mammals, reptiles, amphibians, birds are a bit of a trick. Birds, it says, are created from a little bit of land and from the sea, are created from the earth. According to Torah, look at Chumash in Genesis and Bereshis, Taitzi ha'aretz, the earth produces the animals that walk on the land. Okay. According to Torah, fish. And the question then becomes, are whales fish? And I think the answer is yes, according to Torah, but let's not get into any trouble. Are created by the water. Yishitzu hamayim, sheretz nefesh chaya. So the difference between land animals and aquatic animals and marine animals is not just where they live, but where they come from. Animals that live in the water come from the water itself. The water created them. Animals that come from the land itself. And I'll tell you where this plays out in halacha. You guys know that when a person tevels in a mikveh, there's a problem of chatzitza. If you tevel the mikveh and there's something covering a part of your body, the tefillah is not kosher. So when guys go to the mikveh, it's not so important because most of the mikvahs that we do, except for Erev Yom Kippur, is not a chiyuv of mikveh, it's a minig of mikveh. But when a woman goes to the mikveh, or a ger tzedek converts, that's a very serious mikveh. And they have to be very careful for chatzitza. That's why there's a whole process called chafifa. Before a person uses the mikveh, they have to they have to examine and clean their entire body. There should be nothing covering their body. Because if something covering their body, the mikveh is not kosher. And we're very frum about this. I mean, we're really very frum about it. We go to extremes about being perfect. What if a woman has a piercing? And if she takes the ring out of her piercing, and if you have a piercing in your ears, they take the ring out for 10 minutes, nothing is going to happen. But there are certain places in the body, like on the lip and the tongue, You take the piercing after 10 minutes, the hole closes. They close this very fast. So a lady has a toivel in the mikveh, for example, and they have a piercing in a place in the body where if they'll take the ring out that keeps the hole open, it'll literally close the amount of time it takes to toivel. And she says, I won't do a mikveh. You're not talking about a from lady, obviously, and it's a big Mercedes nefesh to use the mikveh, although it's a very beautiful mitzvah. So what they do is they take a fishbone and they put it in the piercing, and she toivels. This is not a theoretical. This is an actual halacha l'maaseh.
Wait, what does she do?
She takes out the ring of metal, puts in a fishbone, because a fishbone is halachically considered water.
Whoa.
So it's not a chatzitza. Interesting?
That's crazy.
Now, don't try this at home. This is not a lechatchila. This is a heter that the Rabbanim give for a woman who otherwise would not use the mikveh, and using the mikveh in Taras HaMishpach is much more important. But isn't that interesting? Because since a fish comes from the water, they're halachically water. And a land animal comes from the earth. So the philosophy goes that land animals come from a source. The philosophy goes, land animals come from a source, but in order for them to live, they have to be outside of their source. Most mammals and reptiles cannot live in the earth. They'll suffocate. There's some animals that do, but most animals have to live outside of their source. So the philosophy is, you come from the earth, but you have to be separate from the earth. On the other hand, most aquatic animals, marine animals, the only for them to live is to live in their source. You take a fish out of water, as several of you pointed out, halachically, asifasan zuvish chitasan, when you pull a fish out of water, the minute it's withdrawn from the water, it's in the criteria of Shulchan Aruch shechted. Asifasan zuvish chitasan. So some living creatures only exist because they're separated from their source. Other living creatures only exist because they're one with their source. A fish is alive because it's one with water. So when you look at the sea, you don't see the fish. Inside the water, there's fish. But the nature of a fish's existence is that it has to be attached to its source. Correct? That's the meaning of the words kamayim l'yom echasim. You have a water. Inside the water, there's many animals. And one of the ideas that the Rebbe points out, you have water. And the water is covering all the animals inside itself. You know what else it's covering? It's covering the basin. The water is in a bowl. A yam, which is the word for sea, and by the way, just for fun, a lake is a yam. A lake, even the lake in the back of your house is a yam. Because the meaning of the word yam is not determined by how big it is, but the nature of the body. A nahar is a river, right? What does the river mean? Running water. The Hebrew word nahar means to run. And the river runs, it moves, the water moves from one place to another, it's constantly moving. A yam means water that's sitting in one place. So the Great Lakes are yamim. They're freshwater seas. They're small, obviously, not as big as the Pacific Ocean. But anytime you have water that's basically sitting in one place in a big bowl, so the water is covering the fish inside, and it's covering the bowl, which is holding that water in place, whether it's 10,000 miles across or it's 10 feet across. You don't see the bed, you don't see the bottom of that lake. You don't see the bottom of that bowl, of that basin that's holding the water. So the water is covering everything inside of itself. So there's a lot of stuff in the water, but all you see is the water. Now in philosophy you would answer, there's a lot of things in this life. Water is a source of life. But all you see is the life itself. You don't see the entities living off that life. So Mashiach is going to come. We're talking about Elam Haba now, the Elef HaShvi, the 7th millennia. We're not talking about Mashiach, we're talking about the 7th millennia. The pasuk goes on, Uvashvi yeti lachafshi, when the 7th millennia comes, Moshe Rabbeinu no longer has to give us das. For 6th millennia, Moshe has to give us das. Ve'ela meshpat v'tasam oftem kitikne evidivity. But when the 7th millennia comes, Kvayachol, we have das directly from the Eibishter. Now what's going to happen to Moshe Rabbeinu Elam Haba? Don't worry, he'll be busy and he'll be very happy. Moshe is not a big complaint, he'll be very, very happy. He'll be very happy to hear that all Yidden are very connected to the Eibishter, even that means he has less to do. And in the 7th millennium, we all have das, but the nature of a das is like water covered the sea, which means we all have the same das. That's what the Rebbe is saying. Okay? Does anybody want to comment?
It's boring.
Huh?
It's boring.
That was?
No, that was boring. That is boring.
Yeah.
What, Elam Haba?
Yeah, we'll all just have DOS. Like,
Yeah.
what then?
See, she said, this is the Rambam. That's a very good observation. This is the Rambam. I love the Rambam. I have to thank the Rebbe for the Rambam. If not for the Rebbe, I would never learn Rambam. But I didn't just learn the Mishnah Torah. I learned a lot of other svarim of the Rambam. The Rambam has a commentary on Mishnah. Pirush Mishnayos. The Rambam's commentary on Mishnah has a few pieces that are very, very philosophical. They're very special. They're like books unto themselves. One of them is the introduction to the whole Shas. Rambam's Pirush Mishnayos. Another one is his introduction to Pirkei Avos, which is called Shmoyne Prakim. It's really a classic work. It's very special. And the third is an introduction to the 10th Perek of Sanhedrin. Kol Yisrael Yesh Lo V'Chelik El Mabah. So the Rambam has a long introduction to the 10th Perek of Sanhedrin. In that introduction to the 10th Perek of Sanhedrin, amongst other things, the Rambam talks about the Gimel Ikrim, the 13 principles of faith. Okay, but he talks about Elam Haba, about the world to come. And the Rambam talks you through it. The Rambam's mastery of common sense and speaking to people straight is extraordinary. There's nobody like that Rambam. The Rambam is very, very smart. But he's also very simple. Everything he says is so easy. You have to think. If you read the Rambam casually, it's not respectful of the Rambam. You have to, there's no footnotes. You have to read, you have to pay attention. But his ability to make things simple is just extraordinary. There's nobody like him. He's a one of a kind, the Rambam. So the Rambam talks you through schar, and he starts off with the little kid, and you want the little kid to make a bracha. You say, if you make the bracha, I'll give you a cookie. And the Rambam asks you a psychological question. To that child who's making that bracha, what is more precious, the bracha or the cookie? The answer is the cookie. The child doesn't value the bracha. And the Rambam says, if you gave somebody a cookie for making a bracha, but at least they knew and believed that the bracha is more valuable than the cookie, so it will be meaningful. But if I'm giving a child a cookie to make a bracha, and as far as the child is concerned, the important thing is the cookie, and the bracha is just a means to an end, you're really not teaching them to make brachas. And the Rambam says, but that's called Mitayach Shaloi Lishma Ba Lishma. It's the way of the world. You have to start Shaloi Lishma, and you work your way towards Lishma. And he talks you through basically bribes. What we call in Lubavitch today, one of the most obscene words in the Lubavitch culture, but it's unfortunately very dominant because it works, miftzes. My whole religion is miftzes. Why do I keep Shabbos? Miftzes. Why do I not use my phone all day and all night? Miftzes. Everything is a miftzah. We got to grow up. Sof kol sof, it's called miftzah life. But okay, that takes a while. So the Rambam talks you through. You give the kid a cookie, you give the kid a toy, you give the kid money, you flatter the child. He talks you through different levels of schar. And he talks about this question where you want to transition schar from the cookie being more important than the bracha to becoming less important than the bracha. And he completes by saying the real reward for a mitzvah should be the mitzvah. Because mitzvahs are about a relationship with the Eibishter. And at some point we should grow up enough to appreciate that the end game is I do mitzvahs not for cookies, I do mitzvahs for mitzvahs. Now, even if I get a cookie, but the cookie is secondary, and ultimately you want to reach a stage where there isn't even a cookie, there's just the mitzvah. So the Rambam says, think about Elam Haba. A Yid lives a life, lives, dies, does mitzvahs, does avedus, whatever he goes through, and he has to cleanse himself. Bottom line is there's something called Elam Haba. Elam Haba is schar, is reward. So what's the reward for being a Jew? Cookies? He actually presents you that question. And the Rambam says you have to say, just like in mitzvahs, physically, the point of making a bracha is not getting a cookie. It's making a bracha even if you get a cookie. And ultimately you want to graduate from getting the cookie just to doing the mitzvah itself. You must say that Olam Haba is the same. That the reward in Olam Haba is not cookies. The reward in Olam Haba is the relationship with the Eibishter. That's how he presents it. Now, the Rambam does not have a concept of elokus. He doesn't speak about the revelation of godliness. The Rambam has a concept of seichel. So he uses the illusion of knowing God. The reward for being a Jew is being close to God. And being close to God isn't boring. But he says what you're saying. He really does.
No, not boring as in being close to God is boring. Boring as in there's nothing to work for.
Okay, that is true. That is true. And the Rambam actually says an axiom, which is quoted all the time. People just don't know the context of the quote. One of the most familiar quotes attributed to the Rambam is these words: "Tainuk tmidi eini tainuk." Constant pleasure is not pleasureful. Right? If you ate steak every day, you'd become sick of it. If you did anything every day, as entertaining and as exciting as it is, we need variety, right? So the Rambam makes the statement: if you have the same pleasure every day, it becomes boring. And then the Rambam says, but that's exactly what El Haba is. So the Rambam's bringing that statement, Tainuk Tmidi, any Tainuk, constant pleasure is not pleasure, not to explain that El Haba is boring, but to explain how much we can't understand what El Haba feels like. If you could be close to the Eibishter constantly, would you get bored? Would you get bored? The answer to that question is, the only way to know the answer to that question is to experience closeness with Hashem. I know for sure that if I ate steak every day, I'd get bored. I know for sure that if I ate pizza every day, I'd get bored. I know for sure if I, whatever it is, you choose the pleasure. Whatever works for you, whatever is your particular form of entertainment, in order for something to be meaningful, it has to be special, which means you have to have change, right? But Elam Haba is not change. So the Rambam is bringing this quote not to say that Elam Haba is boring, it's to say that Elam Haba is beyond their understanding. But the quote out of context actually is interpreted the exact opposite of the Rambam's intent in context. So what I'm doing in answering your question is, your point is made by the Rambam, but your point is made by the Rambam not to say that Elam Haba is boring, but to say that we can't understand what Elam Haba feels like, because it's not going to be boring. It's like saying, is the Eibishter bored? He doesn't change at all. he has no more knowledge. In no way can the Eibishter be improved upon. That's boring.
But that concept doesn't apply to him.
You think? So the Vart is Elam Haba, that rule, that this does not apply to him, is going to apply to us. Questions or comments?
Where do amphibians come from?
Talk louder, please.
Where do amphibians come from?
You mean from the water or from the land? It's a very interesting question, and I don't know the answer, but I will say that it says in Rashi that birds come from both.
Birds?
Birds come from the land and from the sea.
Oh, no, air.
It says in Yishonim.
What birds?
All birds. You came in late. All land animals come from the earth, all aquatic animals come from the water, and birds come from both. It's, I saw in the Beis Rivka, I think, that the proof is that they have reptilian feet. The feet of birds are reptilian. Now, if you know the language of the scientists of now, scientists say dinosaurs didn't go extinct. Dinosaurs still exist. Oh, really? Where's dinosaurs? Birds. That's the language of biology today.
Reptiles are considered water?
So he asked me.
Because I feel like amphibians are said.
Reptiles are certainly land animals. The question is amphibians, right? That means amphibians have a life cycle that for part of their life they have to be inside the water, and then part of their life they develop lungs and they could be outside the water, but they're always prone, they need to be moist. They really will not do well. They'll desiccate. Their bodies do not hold water very, very well. The answer to your question is, I don't know. If I had to guess, I would say the sea. Maybe they're like fish, someplace like birds, someplace in between. But the honest answer to the question is, ich weiß nicht.
Wait, Rabbi, the reptile part of the birds, what makes it land or water?
Land.
Why do the feathers make it water?
The reptile makes it the water. It's interesting. The legs make it aquatic.
But what reptiles aren't aquatic?
Your point well taken. That's a very, very good point.
Also, not all birds.
A lot of reptiles are.
I mean, yeah, no, they are.
Water
they,
tiles.
Why don't they come from the air?
They can't breathe underwater.
It's
So
not
like,
like a water.
They
It's like
fly.
a mix of water and reptile.
bruh. They're like most reptiles. I mean, they chill in water. But not,
I'm going to leave your question alone.
Maybe it's penguins.
It's a bird.
That is bird.
Are penguins birds in aloha?
Yeah.
Okay, 100%.
Those ones for sure come from water.
Never argue with 100%.
Yes, they are.
Chavre, we're moving on. Let's go.
Read any animal book ever. They're in the book.
I didn't ask you about animal books. I asked you about Torah.
Are bats birds?
Tyra too.
They're just fish.
They're not just fish. They have bird beaks. They have bird organs. They have bird
They have
feet.
fur?
They have bird
They're birds.
feathers.
They're
That's
amphibians.
on them.
Exactly. Fish.
Penguins are birds.
They're birds, I like that.
Birds.
Chavre, when you're done, you'll let me know. I'd like to continue the class. May we? So the Rebbe continues that he says, Chavre, line 7, from the top of page Chav Dalet. V'yesh l'kasher zeh, I would like to connect this, im hamavur b'drush hayelula, what is explained in the Maimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe that he gave and wrote for his own passing, which is Basi Lagani, be'inyan Tzivis Hashem, and the idea of Tzivis Hashem. You guys have to understand, this Maimer was said when the Rebbe was a Rebbe for 20 days. 20 days. As great and holy as the Rebbe is, it was very emotional for the Rebbe. The Rebbe was experiencing transformation, from being a chassid of the Frierdiker Rebbe to being his own person, And in the beginning, it was very hard for the Rebbe. He got pretty good at it, although he always blamed everything on the Frierdiker Rebbe, but he became a very big Rebbe. In the beginning, you saw the Rebbe emotionally work through being a Rebbe. So he refers back to the Frierdiker Rebbe at every opportunity. Here's an example. He connects to the Basa Lagani. The Tzivas Hashem means the army of Hashem. Now, in the Maimon of the previous Rebbe, Tzava Yesh Begimel Pirush. The word Tzava has 3 translations. Number 1, Lashon Zman Mubon. Tzava means time, and there's a pasuk to support it. Number 2, Lashon Yefi. Tzava means beauty, and there's a pasuk to support that. And number 3, Lashon Chaya v'Kabbalah Sel, the expression that means a soldier and one who is accepting a burden with submission. Now, we all know that Tzava means a soldier, but that Tzava means time, and that Tzava means beautiful, is novel to us. But the previous Rebbe brings all 3 translations, that a soldier is somebody who serves, he serves in time, and the end of a soldier is beauty. That's how you have to understand it. A soldier fights. He fights in a certain time and in a certain place. He's limited to time and place. And the end game of a soldier, is what he leaves behind, is beautiful. So all 3 translations fit into the word tzava. So let's... okay, I'll tell you how it works. Okay, I'll tell you how it works. Okay. I could give you many examples. I'll use this example, okay? What I'm about to say, I don't have a source for. I believe it very strongly, but I really don't have a source for it, okay? After the Mabul, the human race was divided into 70 languages, as we call them, right? As a result of that, Aflagu became... When man was originally created, all men were equal. We looked the same, we spoke the same language. Then, after the Mabul, the Deir Aflaga, we became 70 different nations. We died to become 70 different nations and 70 different languages, and we developed race distinction, right? Some of us became black, some of us became fair, some of us became tall, some of us became short, some of us became stocky, some of us had longer fingers and longer ears, some of us had shorter fingers and shorter ears, and so on and so forth. Now,
that didn't happen. That didn't happen by
evolution. It happened by evolution. Yes, it did. The problem, the question that we have is, what does the Eibishter do to trigger it?
When Ham got cursed, or no?
No, the Flugger, when they made the Tower of Babel. When they made the Tower of Babel.
It didn't happen that Hashem cursed the descendants of Ham. That
Okay, I'm leaving that question unanswered.
that they'll be black.
That they'll be slaves. They'll be black is added by the racists. That they'll be slaves. It doesn't say black. Okay.
Quote,
Isn't Rashi saying that?
quote Torah anthology, their lips will become big, that of a Negro.
Okay, I'm sorry.
About 200 years after the Mabul, the people got together, they made a Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel was a big Aved, it was Aved Zara, okay? And the Eibishter couldn't punish them, according to Chumash Rashi, because the Eibishter has a weakness. You know, the Eibishter has a weakness. The Eibishter has a weakness. The problem with the Eibishter's weakness is it happens to be the weakness of the Jewish people also. The Eibishter's weakness is peace. When people get along, people nice to each other, they can be the biggest Rishonim, even Evdi Avodah Zarah, he won't punish them. The Dair HaFlaga is considered bigger Rishonim than the Dair HaMabel, and they were never punished. Because they had one strength. They were nice to each other. They were picking on God, but they were nice to each other. So the Eibishter couldn't punish them. So instead of punishing them, he spread them around all over the world. And so the way it's explained in Chazal is that they started speaking different languages. When people start not understanding what another each other say, it becomes very, very difficult. And they began to vacillate, to lean towards their own kind. The Chumash describes the disbursement of people after the Mabul all over the world. It's hard to know exactly how far all over the world. Does all over the world mean the area directly around Eretz Yisrael, or does it mean Polynesia? Does it mean the New World? You know what I'm saying? How far away did people go when the Day of Flaga happened? Did they go as far away as New Zealand and Australia and Hawaii and the Americas? Or did they go as far away as India and Bulgaria and England and Central Africa? How far away did the 70 nations go? But after the Day of Flaga, the Eibishter changed people enough that they should diversify. Now, what part of it did the Eibishter do and what part of it happened over time? It's hard to know. For sure, the Eibishter got involved in language. They stopped understanding each other. That's what it says in Chazal. That's the Chumash. But the changes of races and the changes of our physical appearances, did the Eibishter do that, or did the Eibishter set up that it would happen over time? People's body shape is a reflection of the time and place they live. It's just a fact. Evolution happens very rapidly. It's not a state at all. So did the Eibishter do that? Did the Eibishter make that Eskimos should be short and plump and have small little stubby fingers and tiny little ears and small little noses because they live in very cold weather, and if they'd have long fingers and big ears, they'd have frostbite and lose them? And people living in warm climates have very long fingers and big noses and big ears. Did the Eibishter do that, or did nature do that? But the Eibishter certainly triggered the diversification of people. Now you're listening to me? Over the course of history, especially in America, the races get entangled. Right? America is a melting pot. America is a land which, using the language of the Chumash, which people don't pay attention to, America should be called Al Pi Torah Goyim. In Pashas Lech Lecha, there was a king over a civilization called Goyim. Rashi says, what is the meaning of Goyim? A bunch of people came together and made a king, and they became Goyim. Sidol Melech Goyim, one of the 4 kings that fought with the 5 kings of Sodom, his name of his kingdom was Goyim. Amrafa Melech Shinar, Aryach Melech Elazar, Kedalachel Me'elam, Sidol Melech Goyim. Goyim means a bunch of races together. So even then, in times of Avraham Avinu, there was already a concept of peoples coming together. So in many places in the world, most places in the world, you don't have a nation of people that lives that's just one race that the Eibishter created. The Eibishter created the world in the way that there's 70 nations. According to potentially 70 nations, even though in the United Nations over 200 countries, or close to 200 countries, up in Torah there's 70 nations, 70 races. They got mixed up. Now the world says that that's good. Why? Because you want to neutralize races. Everybody should be the same, right? We should all intermarry and we should have the same values. Now you're supposed to say the mandatory blah, 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 blah. But Torah doesn't think so. Torah doesn't hold that if you necessarily have to hate your neighbor because you're a different race and a different language. It's true. People do become jealous of each other and they compete with one another. And therefore there's all of these ideas that if we would stop being so different, we would stop hating one another. But this is a political conversation and a social conversation for a different time. Al Pi Torah, every nation has a land. And every race, every group of people has a relationship with that piece of land. They're connected to that land. The Eibishter put them there after the Mabul. And I have this idea in my mind that just like when Mashiach comes, every Jew goes and lives in Eretz Yisrael. And the mystical idea that after Mashiach comes, every piece of Eretz Yisrael, every shul, any place in the world, which was the way the Rebbe said it in Nesichos, from the beginning of time, a piece of Eretz Yisrael is picked up and placed where it needs to be. After Mashiach comes, lahadl, every guy goes back to live in the country of his race. In other words, instead of everybody being mixed together, everybody has their place.
What happens to the people who are 5
So the question becomes, what is their core? What is their essence? The Eibush is he's a pretty big maven in that, and he'll put people where they belong. In other words, he just asked me that. So the point I'm trying to make is, Torah sees the world as a place of order. Of order. Order means everything has a place. And when everything is in the right place, it fits together like a jigsaw puzzle correctly, and it becomes beautiful. The word for this in Kabbalah is hiskalalus. The America believes in everybody being mixed together, and not people having an order, because America argues, and it's very hard to argue with Americans' argument, because in the world you see this as a fact, that if people become isolated different races, it adds in hatred, it adds in jealousy. If everybody mixes together into a big cholent, it's better. But the Hebrew word for that is the word ta'aruvis, which is the opposite of hiskalos. Hiskalos means everything is orderly, everything in its own place. Ta'aruvis means it's disorder. The America of today, which believes in the melting pot idea and even the multicultural idea, it's all about, let's not be ourselves, let's all be what everybody else is so we won't hate each other. That's Hipchat Torah. It's not Torah. It's convenient. It's easier. But it's not Torah. Torah says everything has a place. And when everything is in its place, all people from this nation, what are the original 70 nations? Yeah. Turkey, Tu Garma, it's a pasuk in Chumash. Or Germany, Ashkenaz, it's a pasuk in Chumash. The 70 names in Parshas Noach are actually 70 nations. And some of them we know which they are. The Eibishter made Turks. Every Turk has to live in Turkey. If you're a non-Turk, you belong in Armenia, or you belong wherever you belong. And after Mashiach comes, I believe that just like all Yid live in Eretz Yisrael, every Goy goes back to his nation of origin. And when people live in their land, and they figure out how to get along, that's what makes it messianic. Even though we're separated by race, it doesn't create additional jealousy and hatred, it creates order. That is called beautiful. And Mashiach's coming and creating that beauty is called the end of Birur. Everybody knows about Avodas HaBirurim. Avodas HaBirurim means to organize. Things are all mixed up. The Hebrew word for mixed up is taruvis. Things to be separated out and reordered so that they're in the right place. And when they're reordered in the right place, they're mixed together in an orderly fashion, like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. And instead of using the word taruvis means they're mixed up in a disorderly way, you use the word hiskalos means they're mixed up in an orderly way. And the psychology of that is, this is where people get to be their biggest self. The downside of the American idea of multiculturalism and melting is that none of us are able to maximize ourselves. Because in order for us to be together, we have to compromise ourselves. Torah doesn't believe in that. Torah believes in every person maximizing him or herself. And to maximize yourself, to express all of what you are, please lock the door behind him. And to maximize yourself, you have to not be able to be held back by not wanting to hurt your neighbor. So Mashiach, in my mind, Mashiach is not just a Jewish concept, it's a global concept. And the global concept is that every nation goes back to its place. So the Rebbe brings, in the Maimon Basilagani, Tzava means three things. Number one, a war. What's the war? To take the disorderly world and organize it, fix it. Number two, time. We're limited in how much time we're entitled to do this. And number three, beauty. That when we finish the job, the world is beautiful. So the word Tzava, Tzivis Hashem, means these three things. Struggling to make the world orderly, struggling for every person to find out who they really are, in quotes, and to be themselves completely, and not say, I can't express this part of myself because I'm going to offend you. I can't express that part of myself because I'm going to offend you. I can't express the third part of myself because it's not going to be fair to you. And that's how the world becomes beautiful. That's the mystical idea of Birurim. After Mashiach comes, everything has a place. Okay? I'll continue tomorrow.